It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
She looked me in the eyes with contempt and said I would never amount to anything. She left me for a guy in an expensive car, thinking she had secured a sweet life forever. But she forgot one thing. Rage is the most powerful fuel for success. Exactly 1 year later, I walked into a boardroom not to beg for a job, but to buy her perfect husband's business, which he had driven into the ground. Listen to how I destroyed their world without throwing a single punch. The sound of a zipper closing has never sounded like a gunshot before, but that's exactly what it felt like. A loud, sharp crack that signaled the end of my life as I knew it. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, our bed, watching Elena pack the last of her designer clothes into a suitcase that probably cost more than my car. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from a mix of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated shock. I wanted to scream, I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her until she woke up from this nightmare. But I was frozen. I was paralyzed by the sheer cruelty of her silence. Are you really not going to say anything? I finally managed to whisper. My voice cracked. It was pathetic. I hated myself for sounding so weak, but my heart was being ripped out of my chest, and I couldn't pretend to be made of steel. Elena didn't even look at me. She was meticulously folding a silk blouse, her movements precise, robotic. Cold. There's nothing left to say, Jack, she replied, her tone flat. It was the voice you use when you're ordering coffee, not when you're destroying a 3-year relationship. We've been over this. I can't wait for you anymore. I can't wait for your big break or your plans. I'm 26. I need stability. I need a future. And let's be honest, you're not a future. You're a liability. A liability. That word hung in the air like toxic smoke. I was working 2 jobs. I was sleeping 4 hours a night trying to get my startup off the ground. I was doing everything for us. For her. But apparently, sweat and loyalty weren't currencies she accepted anymore. I'm this close, Elena, I pleaded, gesturing vaguely to the laptop on the messy desk in the corner. The prototype is working. Investors are looking. Just give me 6 more months. She finally turned to face me. The look in her eyes wasn't sadness. It wasn't regret. It was pity, and that was worse than hatred. It was the kind of look you give a wounded animal before you put it out of its misery. Jack, she sighed, checking her watch. A Rolex. I hadn't seen that before. Mark is waiting downstairs. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mark. Of course. Mark. I knew who he was. Everyone knew who Mark was. He was the guy who owned the logistics firm downtown. Inherited daddy's money, played the big shot, drove a matte black G-Wagon that took up 2 parking spaces. He was loud, obnoxious, and rich. He was everything I wasn't. You're leaving me for him? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. The guy who treats waiters like trash? The guy who cheats on his taxes? That's your idea of a future. He's a man who takes action, Jack, she snapped, zipping the bag shut. He doesn't dream. He owns. He can give me a life where I don't have to worry if we can afford rent next month. Can you say the same? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because she was right. Technically, I couldn't pay the rent next month. Not easily. I was all in on my project. I was broke, but I had integrity. I had love. That's what I thought, she sneered. She grabbed the handle of her suitcase and walked to the door. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor was a countdown. Click, click, click. At the doorway, she paused. For a second, I thought she might turn back. Maybe hug me. Maybe say she was sorry. Keep the toaster, she said over her shoulder. You'll need it. And then she was gone. I sat there for what felt like hours. The apartment was suddenly too big, too quiet. The scent of her expensive perfume, Chanel, the one I saved up 3 months to buy her for her birthday, still lingered in the air, mocking me. I eventually forced myself to stand up and walk to the window. I had to see it. I had to see the final nail in the coffin. Down on the street, under the orange glow of the streetlights, I saw the beast. The matte black SUV. It was idling, exhaust puffing into the cool night air. Mark was leaning against the hood, wearing a suit that cost more than my entire education. He was smoking a cigar, looking bored. When Elena walked out of the building, his face lit up, not with love, but with possession. He looked at her like she was a trophy he had just won an auction. He opened the door for her, but before she got in, he looked up, straight at my window. He couldn't possibly see me in the dark behind the blinds, but I felt his gaze. He smirked, a wide, arrogant predator's grin. He raised his cigar in a mock toast, then got into the driver's seat. The engine roared, a deep, guttural sound of power and money. And just like that, they drove off into the city lights, leaving me in the darkness. I felt my knees. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a cold, hard knot form in the pit of my stomach. It was heavy. It was dark. I looked around the apartment. The peeling paint, the cheap furniture, the stack of overdue bills on the counter. I saw myself through her eyes. A loser. A dreamer. A nobody. But as I stared at the red taillights fading in the distance, something shifted inside me. The sadness began to evaporate, replaced by something much hotter. Something dangerous. A liability, I whispered to the empty room. I walked over to the mirror in the hallway. I looked like hell. Deeply dark circles under my eyes, unkempt stubble, a stained t-shirt. But the eyes were different. The soft look of the boy who loved her was gone. I grabbed a marker from the table and wrote on the mirror, right over my reflection. Date, October 12th. Goal, own them. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to get mad. I wasn't going to get sad. I was going to get even. The next morning, I didn't go to my first job. I called in and quit. I didn't go to my second job either. I quit that too. I had exactly $400 in my bank account and a prototype code that 99% of people said was useless. But Mark had made a mistake. He thought he had taken my prize. He didn't realize he had just removed my only distraction. I sat down at my computer. I cracked my knuckles. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. Let's play, I muttered. The first month was hell. I stopped eating regular meals. I lived on instant noodles and cheap energy drinks. I didn't see the sun. I coded for 20 hours a day. My useless prototype was an algorithmic trading bot designed to exploit micro inefficiencies in the emerging crypto derivatives market. It was high risk. It was insane. It was the kind of thing desperate men do. And I was the most desperate man on earth. By week 4, the bot made its first real trade. I made $50. By week 6, I had turned that into $500. It wasn't enough. I needed leverage. I needed capital. I did something stupid. I took out a loan. A predatory loan from a guy you don't want to meet in a dark alley. If this failed, I wouldn't just be broke, I'd be dead. Or at least, wishing I was. I dumped the entire loan, $20,000, into the algorithm. I remember the night I activated it. It was raining. The same kind of rain as the night she left. I sat there, watching the numbers flicker on the screen. Green, red, green, red. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Ding. Profit. Plus $2,000. Ding. Profit. Plus $4, 500. It was working. The market was crashing, panic selling everywhere, but my bot was feasting on the volatility. While everyone else was losing their shirts, I was picking up the gold they dropped. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I watched the account balance grow. $50,000. $120,000. $250,000. In 3 months, I had made more money than I would have made in 10 years of my old jobs. But I didn't buy a car. I didn't move apartments. I didn't buy a watch. I reinvested. I expanded. I hired a small team of freelancers remotely. Guys from Eastern Europe who didn't ask questions and coded like gods. We built a platform. We scaled. 6 months in, I hit my first million. Liquid. I sat in my crappy chair, staring at the 7 figures on the screen. I should have felt happy. I should have felt relieved. But all I felt was that cold knot in my stomach. It hadn't gone away. It had just gotten harder. I opened a new tab on my browser. I didn't look at real estate. I didn't look at vacations. I typed in the search bar, Mark Reynolds Logistics Corporation. I started reading, and what I found made me smile for the first time in half a year. Mark was flashy. Mark was rich. But Mark was stupid. His company was bleeding. He had over-leveraged to buy a new fleet of trucks right before fuel prices spiked. He was losing major contracts to automated competitors. His stock price was down 40% year to date. He was drowning, and he was trying to hide it with expensive dinners and matte black SUVs. I leaned back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place. But I wasn't ready yet. I didn't just want to hurt him. I wanted to erase him. I needed more capital, and I needed a way in. That's when I saw the news article. Reynolds Logistics seeking strategic partnership to modernize fleet. Translation: they needed cash, and they needed it fast. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number of a lawyer I had recently put on retainer, a shark named Saul who specialized in hostile takeovers and corporate restructuring. Saul, I said, my voice raspier than it used to be. It's Jack. Jack, my favorite recluse. What can I do for you? Ready to buy that island yet? No, I said, staring at the picture of Mark and Elena on a social media post from a gala the night before. She was wearing a red dress. He had his hand on her waist. It looked like royalty, I want to buy some debt. Debt? Whose debt? Reynolds Logistics. All of it. Use the shell companies. I don't want my name anywhere near the paperwork. Not yet. There was a pause on the line. Jack, that's a dying horse. You buy that debt, you're buying a headache. Why do you want that? I looked at the writing on my mirror, still there after 6 months, dusty but legible. Own them. Because, I said softly, I'm going to be their landlord. Get done, Saul. I don't care about the premium. Buy it all. I hung up. The hunt had begun. Ownership is a strange thing. When you own something on paper, it's just ink and signatures. But when you own someone's debt, you own their sleep. You own their stress. You own the air they breathe. It took Saul 3 weeks to acquire 60% of Reynolds Logistics' outstanding loans. It cost me a fortune, money I had made risking everything on high-frequency crypto trades, but every cent was worth it. I wasn't buying assets. I was buying a leash. For the next few months, I played the ghost. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I simply watched from the shadows as the pressure began to crush them. I had set up alerts on my phone for everything related to Mark and Elena. Social media posts, check-ins, news articles. On Instagram, they were still posting photos of champagne toasts and weekend getaways to the Hamptons. To the outside world, they were the golden couple. Successful, beautiful, happy. But I knew the truth. I saw the bank statements. Mark was bleeding cash. The modernization he promised never happened. Instead, I saw withdrawals for consulting fees that went straight into offshore accounts. I saw credit card bills for jewelry and 5-star hotels paid directly from the company's operating capital. He wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a thief. He was robbing his own company to keep Elena happy, to keep up the charade that he was the big man on campus. One rainy Tuesday in November, about 8 months after the breakup, I decided I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to see if the cracks in the financial reports were showing on their faces. I knew they dined at Le Jardin every Tuesday. It was the kind of place where a salad cost $40 and the waiters judged your shoes. I put on a baseball cap, a dark hoodie, and sat at the bar in the corner, nursing a whiskey. I looked like a tech bro who had just rolled out of bed, which, ironically, made me fit right in with the new money crowd. They walked in at 7:30 p.m. The change was subtle, but to me, it was screaming. Mark looked heavier. His face was puffy, flushed red, likely from too much alcohol and high blood pressure. He was checking his phone constantly, aggressively typing messages while the hostess tried to seat them. And Elena? My heart didn't flutter this time. It didn't break. It just observed. She looked tired. The designer dress was flawless. Her hair was perfect, but her eyes were darting around the room nervously. She wasn't smiling. She was looking at Mark with a mixture of annoyance and fear. They sat at a booth near the window. I couldn't hear every word, but body language screams louder than voice. Mark slammed his phone onto the table. Elena Flinked. He said something sharp, pointing a finger at her. She crossed her arms, defensive, shrinking in her seat. The waiter arrived with wine, and Mark waved him away dismissively, pouring the glass himself, filling it to the brim. This wasn't the honeymoon phase anymore. This was the money is tight and I'm stressed phase. I signaled the bartender. Send a bottle of your best champagne to table 4, I said, sliding my black Amex card across the counter. Don't say who it's from. Just say, from a secret admirer of your success. I watched as the waiter delivered the bottle. Mark looked confused, then his ego took over. He puffed out his chest, assuming some business partner or fan recognized his greatness. He poured a glass for Elena, a smug grin returning to his face. He thought the world still loved him. He had no idea the champagne was bought by the man who was about to execute him. I finished my drink and walked out into the rain, a savage grin on my face. Enjoy the drink, Mark. It's the last thing I'll ever give you for free. By December, the trap was ready to spring. I had Saul contact Mark's CFO. We presented ourselves as Apex Ventures, a private equity firm specializing in distressed assets. We told them we heard rumors of cash flow issues and were interested in a strategic injection of capital. It was bait, and Mark was a starving shark. They took the meeting. Obviously, I didn't go. I sent Saul and a team of auditors. The report Saul brought back to my penthouse 2 days later was better than I could have imagined. It was a thick binder, bound in black plastic. Jack, Saul said, tossing the binder onto my glass coffee table. You're not going to believe this. It's worse than we thought. I picked up the binder. How bad? It's a Ponzi scheme, essentially, Saul explained, pouring himself a drink. He's using new loans to pay off interest on old loans. He's falsified shipping manifests to inflate revenue, so he could qualify for more credit. And the best part? He's been using the company payroll to pay for the lease on his penthouse and Elena's Porsche. I flipped through the pages. Evidence. Fraud. Embezzlement. If I took this to the police, Mark would go to prison for 10 years. He's desperate, Saul continued. The bank is threatening to foreclose on his main warehouse next week. He needs $5 million immediately to stay afloat. He's willing to sell 51% of the company for it. He basically wants to give away the controlling stake just to keep the lights on and stay out of jail. I closed the binder. The sound was satisfyingly heavy. He thinks Apex Ventures is his savior, I said. Exactly. He thinks some faceless corporate entity is going to bail him out, keep him as CEO, and let him continue his lifestyle. Draft the papers, I said, standing up and walking to the window. The city skyline glittered below me. I own a piece of that skyline now. Agreed to his terms. 51% ownership. Full control of the board. But add a clause. What clause? The new management clause. The new majority owner has the right to restructure the entire executive team immediately upon signing. And the signing, it has to be in person. Saul chuckled nervously. Jack, you know what happens when you walk into that room. It's going to be a bloodbath. No, Saul. I corrected him. A bloodbath is messy. This is going to be a surgery. Precise. Clean. Fatal. We set the date. January 15th. Exactly 1 year and 3 days after Elena walked out the door with her suitcase. Mark was told that the chairman of Apex Ventures would be flying in to sign the final documents and hand over the check. He was told to have his entire executive team present. He was told to bring his partners. I made sure to specify that spouses were welcome for the celebratory dinner afterwards. I wanted her there. I needed her there. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I was vibrating with energy. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the Italian suits I had bought over the last few months. I reached into the back and pulled out an old garment bag. Inside was the suit I wore to my sister's wedding 3 years ago. It was cheap polyester. It didn't fit quite right in the shoulders. It was the suit I was wearing the day I came home early from work and found Elena packing. I put it on. I looked in the mirror. I looked like the old Jack, the loser, the liability. But on my wrist, I strapped on a Patek Philippe watch worth $150,000. And in my pocket, I placed a fountain pen made of solid silver. Contrast. It's all about contrast. I drove to the office building myself. No chauffeur. I parked my new Aston Martin around the corner where no one would see it, and I walked to the front entrance of Reynolds Logistics. The receptionist looked at me with disdain. Can I help you? Deliveries are in the back. I'm here for the board meeting, I said, my voice calm. She raised an eyebrow, looking at my cheap suit. The board meeting? With Mr. Reynolds and the investors? I don't think so, sweetie. Do you have an appointment? I'm not here to clean, Mark, I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. I didn't look at Elena. I kept my eyes locked on him. Security, Mark yelled, standing up, his face turning purple. Get this clown out of here. Elena, did you tell him to come? Is this some kind of joke? Sit down, Mark, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of absolute authority. Excuse me. He walked around the table, puffing his chest out, getting in my face. He was taller than me, but he smelled like fear and cheap cologne. Listen to me, you little loser. We are in the middle of a multi-million-dollar acquisition. Get out before I have you thrown out a window. I know, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. Mark flinched, thinking I had a weapon. I pulled out the silver pen. Then I pulled out the contract that Saul had prepared. The one Mark had already read, but with the signature line blank. I tossed the contract onto the mahogany table. It slid perfectly and stopped right in front of his empty chair. I know it's a multi-million-dollar acquisition, I said, leaning in close so only he could hear the ice in my voice. I'm the one paying for it. Mark froze. He looked at the contract. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the door, expecting the real investors to walk in. Apex Ventures, I said clearly. A wholly owned subsidiary of JR Holdings. JR? Jack Reynolds? No, that's not right. Jack? Review? No. I smiled. A cruel, sharp smile. Jack Roberts. That's me. I own Apex. I own the debt. And in about 5 minutes, I own you. The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Mark's face drained of color. He looked like he was having a stroke. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table. That's impossible, he stammered. You drive a Corolla. You work IT support. That was a year ago, Mark. A lot changes in a year. Crypto changes. Markets change. I turned my head slowly, finally locking eyes with Elena. She was pale. Her hands were covering her mouth. She was looking at me like I was a ghost. Or a god. She looked at my cheap suit. Then she looked at the expensive watch on my wrist. The gears in her head were turning, realizing the magnitude of her mistake. "Hi, Elena," I said. "I see you got the toaster." The silence in the boardroom was heavy enough to crush bones. Mark was staring at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. His $5,000 suit suddenly looked like a costume. "You're lying," Mark whispered, looking at his lawyers for help. "Tell him he's lying. Get him out of here." His lead attorney, a gray-haired man named Stone, didn't move. He was looking at the documents I had thrown on the table. He picked them up, flipped to the financial guarantee page, and saw the proof of funds. "Certified by the Swiss bank." "Mr. Reynolds," the lawyer said quietly, "the funds are real. The identity is verified. This is the buyer." Mark slammed his fist on the table. "I don't care. I'm not selling my company to him. To this nobody. The deal is off." He started to stand up, looking for a way out. Elena was still frozen in her chair, her eyes darting between me and Mark, calculating the new power dynamic. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just reached into my other pocket and pulled out the black binder. I slid it across the table. It stopped right next to the contract. "You can call off the deal, Mark," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "That is your right as the current majority shareholder. But if you walk out that door without signing, I'm not calling my bankers. I'm calling the FBI." Mark froze. "What is that?" "Page 4, I said. "The shell companies in Panama, where you've been siphoning off the maintenance budget." "Page 12, the tax evasion records." "Page 20, the emails where you instructed your accountant to falsify the quarterly earnings." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "I own your debt, Mark, which means I have full access to your audits. You aren't just broke. You are a criminal. You stole $3 million from your own investors." Mark's face went from red to a ghostly white. He looked at his lawyer. The lawyer opened the binder, scanned a few pages, and then closed it. He took off his glasses and put them in his pocket. "Mark," the lawyer said, his voice void of emotion, "sign the papers." "But, sign the papers," the lawyer repeated sharply, "or I will resign as your counsel right now. If this goes to court, you are going away for 20 years. The room was spinning for Mark. He looked at Elena. "Elena, baby, tell them." But Elena looked away. She was looking at the floor. She knew the ship was sinking, and she wasn't going to tie herself to the anchor. Mark let out a sob, a pathetic, broken sound. He picked up the silver pen I had placed there. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. I watched him sign his life away. Signature 1. Transfer of stock. Signature 2. Resignation as CEO. Signature 3. Non-compete agreement. When he finished, he dropped the pen. He looked defeated. "There," he spat. "You have the company. Are you happy? You won. Now get out of my office." I stood up slowly. I buttoned my cheap jacket. "Your office?" I asked. I looked at the 2 security guards standing by the door. I had hired their firm privately last week to replace the old security team. They work for me now. "Escort Mr. Reynolds out of the building," I ordered. "He is trespassing." "What?" Mark screamed as the guard stepped forward. "You can't do that. I built this place." "You stole from this place," I corrected him. "And take his company phone and the keys to the company car. He can take the bus home." The guard grabbed Mark by the arms. He kicked and screamed, shouting profanities, crying, begging. It was ugly. It was raw. It was the sound of a man who thought he was a king realizing he was just a pawn. They dragged him out the double doors. His screams faded down the hallway. And then there was silence again. The lawyers packed up their briefcases and left quickly, not wanting to be part of what came next. It was just me and Elena. She was still sitting there. She hadn't moved. She looked up at me through her long lashes. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by a soft, misty look. The look she used to give me when she wanted something. "Jack," she breathed. Her voice was trembling, but it was calculated. I don't know what to say. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the street. I saw the security guards shoving Mark onto the sidewalk. I saw him screaming at the sky. "You don't have to say anything," I said, keeping my back to her. I heard the rustle of her dress. She was standing up. She was walking toward me. I could smell that perfume again. "Chanel." "He lied to me, Jack," she said, her voice getting closer. "Mark, he wasn't who I thought he was. He was abusive. He was a fraud. I was scared. I didn't know how to leave." She put a hand on my arm. Her touch used to electric to me. Now it felt cold, like a dead fish. "I missed you," she whispered. "Every day. I thought about us. I thought about how simple things were. You were the only one who ever really loved me for me." I turned around slowly. I looked her in the eyes. They were beautiful eyes. Lying eyes. You left me because I was a liability, I said. You said you needed a future. I was stupid, she cried, tears spilling on her cheeks. I was young and confused. But look at you now, Jack. You did it. You proved everyone wrong. You're brilliant. We can start over. I can help you run this place. We were always a good team. She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. You don't get it, do you? I asked softly. Get what? I didn't buy this company to run it, Elena. I don't want to be a logistics CEO. I have my own business. My own life. Then, what? She asked, confusion clouding her face. Why did you spend millions? Why are you here? I leaned in close. I bought it to kill it. Her eyes went wide. I'm liquidating the assets starting tomorrow. I continued. I'm selling the trucks. I'm selling the warehouse. I'm firing the executive board. I'm stripping this place down to the copper wiring. But Mark's legacy. Mark's legacy is debt and lies. And your legacy, Elena? Your legacy is betting on the wrong horse. I stepped back, putting distance between us. You wanted a man who owns things? Well, I own him. And now I'm done with him. And I'm done with you. Jack, please, she sobbed, the mask finally slipping completely. Panic set in. I have nowhere to go. The lease on the apartment is in the company name. The car is company property. If you liquidate, I'll be homeless. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. I know, I said, but look on the bright side. She looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes for a second. At least you still have a toaster. I walked out. I didn't look back. I walked past the reception, past the confused employees who were about to get generous severance packages because I wasn't a monster to them, only to him. I walked out of the building and into the cold January air. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. I walked to my Aston Martin parked around the corner. I got in and started the engine. It roared to life, a deep, powerful sound. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Saul. It's done. Transfer complete. You just lost about $2 million on the liquidation value, Jack. Hope it was worth it. I looked at the text. I looked at the rearview mirror. I saw Mark sitting on the curb, head in his hands. I saw Elena walking out of the building, looking lost, holding her phone, probably realizing no one was coming to pick her up. I typed back, best money I ever spent. I put the car in gear and drove away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was free.
Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.